Fantastic. Welcome, Nemo, to another corridor conversation with 21st Century Saints. This is the equivalent of us, finding a bit of carpet to pull up and have a little chat in the corridor between lessons. So we've got 40 minutes.
Sounds good.
Before someone comes to find us.
Well, I used to be on the Sunday school presidency throughout most of my time where I grew up, and so I was the one coming out. I remember handing people little slips of paper that said Jesus wants you to be in Sunday school, and like just giving them, because I was told to by, I was 14 at the time. I was told to by the then Sunday school president. And he had this Mark E. Peterson quote with a little picture of Jesus on the slip, and we just hand it to people to try and guilt them into going into Sunday school.
Yeah.
Then when I was actually Sunday school president, I was far more chill about people being in their lessons. I was like, just do what you want. So times change.
How times change, yes. And I suppose that's part of what I wanted to chat to you about, really. So how, you're mid-20s now, aren't you?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I'm 26.
So tell me about 8-year-old getting baptized, Nemo.
Oh, 8-year-old getting baptized, Nemo was very excited. Water was very hot.
Was it?
Yeah, very hot, very overly hot.
No,
I was like a lobster. I was being cooked. My dad couldn't baptize me, so my dad left when I was 6, and he was never a member of the church. Well, he was a member of the church, but he hadn't been going to church for a few years before that. So I think I'm the only one of my siblings he didn't baptize, because there's a big age gap between me and the next one. So I was baptized by my brother-in-law, which is all very lovely. He's still active and really nice guy. So yeah, that was 8-year-old me getting very excited to get baptized, taking it very seriously.
Did you get your first set of scriptures when you got baptized?
Yes. Yeah, and I think I got my little personalized hymn book. There you go, a little artifact for you.
Yeah, there's all those little markers of sort of the rites of passage, aren't there, in Mormonism?
In fact, here are the scriptures. Oh, no, I got these scriptures when I did seminary, so we'll come to seminary. But
okay, yeah.
These are my well-thumbed scriptures.
Now, they're the little bit pricier ones because they've got the little cutout, haven't they?
To make those thumb indexed.
Scripture chases a little bit easier.
Oh yeah, I needed every advantage I could get at scripture chases, but I enjoyed it immensely.
So do you remember at 8 years old a conscious decision to join the church?
Ooh,
or was it a expectation?
It was an expectation. I had the weight of expectation of staying active, and at least at that age. I still remember vividly that morning before getting baptized. I remember standing on the sofa looking at the front door, and having this thought about how, right, after today, I've actually got to not do stuff wrong because there's no getting away with it now. That's it. I'm responsible. I remember thinking, even at the age of 8, I remember the thought of sort of, well, that's it now. And why am I responsible at 8? I remember asking my mum, why is it age 8?
Yeah.
It's like, why am I was like, why was yesterday whatever, fine, but now not a lot's changed. Like at 8, I was having that thought. It wasn't necessarily a faith diminishing thought particularly, it was just curiosity. I was just asking my mum, why does 24 hours make a difference almost?
Yes. Yeah.
It seemed arbitrary to me.
Yeah. And, being the younger of siblings as well, you'd seen other siblings get baptized and you knew that they were baptized. Did you see that they behaved differently to 7 and a bit year old you? Or
well, yeah, my next oldest sibling's 5 years older than me, and then 2 years above that, and then they're every like 2 years and 3 months or whatever. So very well organized was my mum, until I came along 5 years later than 3 years later than I was meant to. But my 2 older brothers, even at that time, my next sibling would have been 13 and then 15, and they were starting to not really go to church, and so my oldest sisters all still went to church, but my 2 brothers had started not going. So there was a lot of pressure on me to kind of do the right thing, as it were.
Wow, that's a lot of expectation, isn't it, for an 8-year-old?
Yeah, and I certainly didn't have informed consent at the age of 8. I didn't
No.
truly understand the commitment I was making, even though I took it very seriously. What I did understand,
Yeah.
because they tell you that it's all about trying to follow Jesus and all that sort of thing, but there's a lot more to it than that, obviously.
Yeah. So I got baptized when I was 14 and a bit. I was, heading towards 15, a few months shy of my 15th birthday. And I was mentioning to you that my first bishop in the ward that I joined into, my sort of home ward, for want of a better word, was your granddad.
Right.
So I have the church in the UK is quite small still, isn't it? There's some families that have been around for maybe 3 or 4 generations. That's not to say that we've always been, we've got English people that moved over to the States a long, long time ago, but in the UK, it's sort of 50s onwards that the church started to stay in the same country and strengthen the stakes of Zion in their home country rather than leave. So I think your granddad was of that generation that probably did join in the 50s, 60s.
Well, baptized, yeah, I think they joined in the early to mid 60s. And then my mum was baptized at 8. But I think she was converted at 3, so like mid 1960s.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. So go ahead. So talk to me about that, having that heritage of your third generation.
Yeah, well, so my grandparents were converts, and so I guess it's different for people when the people in your life that are converts aren't alive anymore. So they're a generation far enough that they're not around anymore. That makes you feel really sort of well established. Whereas I could still talk to my grandparents about being converts. I don't think I ever did. Funnily enough, I don't think I ever actually asked them about what it was like to be converts, because from my mind as a child, my granddad died in 2011, so I was 14. I just started seminary, so and they'd moved out to West Wales a while before that, so I didn't really see a lot of them. So I don't think I ever asked them, because in my mind as a child, they'd always just been members of the church. I remember it being later in my life that I realised that my mum was technically a convert, even though she'd been baptised at 8, because
not
she
born
wasn't
in the covenant.
born in the covenant. Yeah, so she had to go get sealed to her parents and stuff like that.
Yeah, so I have fond memories of your granddad, lovely guy, and your grandma, lovely lady. But interesting that our paths sort of have intersected because of the smallness of the church population in the UK, and that's when it was at its heyday in the mid 80s.
Oh, Leicester was booming.
Yeah, Leicester Stake was a massive stake, and included Coventry wards at that point, and they were then split off to become the Coventry Stake and joined in with some of the Birmingham wards. And now we're seeing that retraction in happening as plummet.
I've been described as a Kremlin watcher for the Mormon Church, which I think is fairly accurate. I just sit and observe what's going on and keep track of all the moving pieces. So, I don't know when this is going to go live, but we will expect that Romford Stake will likely have been closed by the 11th of June, as will Maidstone Stake. So in 12 months, the Mormon Church in the UK has lost 4 stakes and closed quite a few wards with that. So they closed Wolverhampton. They merged Wolverhampton 1 and 2, so they closed one of them. They closed Cannock. They've just closed Woodley Ward and brought Reading to encompass all of that. So that was 2 wards that shared the stake centre. Now they're only 1 ward. I wouldn't be surprised if they did that up in Northampton at some point as well. You've got Northampton, and then is it Dunstan Ward? Is the other one that shares their building, and so you'll just end up with a unified Northampton ward. A lot of these stake centres, they closed one in Leicester a while back. Leicester used to have 4, and then did they get rid of Glenfield?
Got rid of Westcoats, which met at Glenfield Chapel.
Met at Glenfield Chapel, that's the one. Yeah. So, the church is shrinking from its heyday. Leicester was a very strong stake, and to have 4 wards in one city was quite something. In the UK generally, Sheffield's got that and a couple of other places, but
and so when I step back and sort of I've looked at it and try not to get caught up in the fact that it was a religion that I held dear, and I look at the fact that the London Temple was built in the 1950s, and within the space of less than 75 years, we've gone from massive growth and massive growth of numbers in people, growth of buildings, to retraction. And then you think about the fact that that's at the same time that they're announcing a third temple for the UK.
Yeah, because we got Preston in 98. Which, did that become Leicester's temple? I think Leicester swapped a couple of times because they've moved between missions, right?
Yeah, I think Leicester stayed with London. Birmingham, I think, went up to Preston.
But Coventry was London.
Yeah.
I remember, because that was my temple as a kid. But yeah, so we got the second one in 98, and now they've announced a third one in Birmingham, an area where they've just closed a stake.
Yes.
So, I mean, we won't go into it too much, but we could go into the fact that these new temples are basically just Nelson trying to stick it to Hinckley, and people from the temple department are saying he's ignoring all the rules that we used to have about when people got a temple and why, and he's just acting like Oprah and just handing them out like sweets.
Yeah.
You know, and you get a temple and you get a temple, you know?
Yeah.
Temple in Brussels is unnecessary.
And so you say, you sitting there watching and actually just narrating, these are the events and this is what's happening. Do you think it's a challenging place to sit and to tell people what's happening? Do you get a lot of backlash for telling people this is what's happening, these are the numbers, these are the...
Yeah, I get a lot of people telling me it's none of my business. This is interesting.
That's interesting.
Because it's absolutely my business. Things happen, like my stake's one of the ones that's been reorganized. So, the stake choir I'm part of is now the Thames Valley England stake rather than the Reading stake. We've gained and lost. So all of a sudden now some of the people that were in the choir have gone. That'll be interesting to see how that affects it. So this affects me going to church. It affects, the parts of the church I'm involved in and stuff. So
yeah, and I know music's something you hold dear as well, isn't it? And there's been a real link to religion and worship, and maybe one of the things that really keeps you hanging in there. So talk to me about your relationship with music and the church. Would you have been so musical were it not for the church? What's your thoughts?
Probably would have been. My mum's very musical. My dad is in a low-key sort of way. He doesn't do anything overt, but then he can sing quite well and stuff. So, but I think I might not have been in the same way. I might have got a lot more into sort of rock and roll music and stuff like that, and sort of more modern music rather than singing in choirs and stuff. But I mean, I do play contemporary instruments and things. I used to be involved, but it was a lot softer. It was a lot more sort of folk music and things. That's what I do, and so I never got into quite the energetic side of music in the same way. But yeah, I went back to Coventry Stake the other week, and was ready to vote opposed if they asked the question, because I was there. I was visiting with my mum. And the old choir director of the ward I was in Coventry State came up to me and said, "Oh, you're here. Do you want to come sing with us?" So all right. So I said yes, of course, because I went into Mormon mode. You're in Mormon mode. You're like, yes, I will do whatever you ask. You just say yes. And then she hands in the music, and it's "We Thank Thee, O God, for a Prophet." And I'm thinking, now how do I sing "We Thank Thee, O God, for a Prophet" after voting opposed to Russell M. Nelson? How do I do that? But they cancelled the opposing votes on us. They didn't do any of the sustaining of church officers. So I just got up there and sang it. And as they were singing the line, "The wicked who fight against Zion," I was just kind of grinning. I couldn't help myself. I was just smiling, because that's how a lot of people in that congregation view me, even though that's not what I'm doing. So the irony was just quite enjoyable.
I think it's it's okay to sing it as long as in your head you're pronouncing it FIT, prophet.
Yes, exactly. And crossing my fingers mentally.
Yeah.
It's just a song.
It is just a song. It is just a song, and I think it's really strange. Circling back to what you said about, for some people, they're like, "Why you have no business saying these things." You're still attending. You're still a member of this church. As they are questioning those things, there's an irony there that it's okay as long as you are going with the flow, as long as you are the one that's saying yes to everything that's asked of you.
Yeah.
There is no space, is there, for going, not even there's a problem with this, but even just pointing out this is what's happening.
There isn't, unless you're in my ward, which is basically why I survived, because Oxford ward is this little oasis, where, you know, I still remember my first Sunday school there, where a member of the ward who's well loved, well liked, put her hand up in Sunday school and said, yeah, but the church got $150 billion, so why aren't they doing more? I thought, hang on, what's going on here? You know, what is this? So I can't go every week. My wife very much likes to spend time with me on the weekend. And yeah, it was strange. I don't know why she wants to spend time with me, but she does. So yeah, we have a deal. I try and go once a month, and I get involved in the state choir and things like that. It's fine.
Yeah,
I took my mum to an Easter concert, got her to sing in the choir as well. Yeah, it's good.
And
fun.
that's fantastic that you're in a ward that you can sit in that space and ask the awkward questions, or even just say these are the facts. If that feels awkward to you as a believing member, that's interesting for you to work through. That's on you. But it's not fair that that's not everybody's experience.
Yeah, it feels uncomfortable because it's not everyone's experience. Yeah, I know I go to some wards and it'll be like going back in time 30 years.
Yeah.
And that's difficult.
So I know in the comment section when we've done videos before, when you've spoken out about things, especially when you do more high profile things with the guys over in the States, I read some of those comments, and there's always at least one person that says, hey, is Nemo still active? Does he still believe? Because you're saying challenging things.
I'm trying to model that space for people.
Yeah.
In the hopes that more people will do it and more wards will become open. And I think that the problem you have with the church at the moment is you've got essentially people who just don't believe and don't care. They will just leave. You've got people who are kind of like me, and that's a broad range of people, but sit in a more nuanced space. And then you've got the diehard, take it all or leave it all people. The take it all or leave it all people will stay. You'll get the people like me that will leave eventually if things don't change, and then the people that don't care generally leave, or sometimes they stay because they don't care,
because it doesn't hurt
it's just
them.
a social club because it doesn't hurt, because it's fine. So you've got these groups of people, and I think the church is losing that broad middle ground a lot, because they're the people who can think about it, and when they realize it just isn't working, they'll just leave.
So, as a straight white man,
yes,
you have far more to lose. The church is far better to you than lots of other groups.
Yeah.
So you putting yourself in a position where you are being the receiver of negativity is in some ways a little bit more uncomfortable. Women have experienced it for 200 years, ever since the church was formed. We know what it is to be not listened to. We know what it is to be diminished and have no voice and have no place at the table. But you've willingly put yourself in that position. What have you lost, or what kudos have you had to give up to do what you do?
It's most apparent when I go back to my home stake. You know, people kind of question why I'm there, kind of roll my eyes if I do say something, roll their eyes if I do say something. Even at a stake level, you know, voting opposed, they kind of look at you like, what's he doing? I don't know if it's directly comparable, because like I said, Oxford ward, for the most part, it's all fine. But there is still, you know, some people there where I say something and then they feel the need to bear the testimony afterwards just to cleanse the room of my evil spirit. So it's just still happen. I mean, I gave up. I was hardworking, willing to say yes, and, you know, at the age of 19, I was on Sunday school presidency. From the age of 14, I've been on ward councils. I went on to the elders quorum presidency when I was in Manchester at university. So I gave up, I don't know, church callings, significant church callings in the future. I was married.
You'll never ever reclaim that space. I'm just telling you now.
Yeah, I'll never be a high priest. Whereas it was likely I would have got called onto a stake high council at some point because I had a car and I was married, and those are the two requisites.
Yes.
You can travel to other units and you have a wife.
Yes.
Basically. So, yeah, I gave up a lot of that. I see other people my age who are on bishoprics now because the church is running out of people. One of the reasons they're closing these stakes is there's not enough people to fill stake callings and still run the wards. Yeah. Not enough people to run the wards in some places, hence closing them. So someone who was straight, white, married, with their own transport, was basically, and was willing, would find themselves being able to wield some power within the church, to hold some position of authority.
Yeah. And not, I'm not a psychologist, but I would imagine that would have really been a nice space to sit in a family dynamic where you'd seen brothers who had stepped away from the church. You'd have got a lot of pats on the back, wouldn't you?
Oh, yeah.
From extended family for filling that role, and well done you. And
well done you, sticking to it. And it's interesting, those members of the extended family that would have done that then came after me quite hard when I became openly critical.
Yeah.
But I got a much better relationship with brothers who had left because now I was way more approachable. I wasn't trying to be Nephi all the time and bring them back and all that sort of stuff. I'd become more approachable. They could be themselves more around me. So I did gain things too out of becoming way more openly critical and able to have those conversations.
Yeah.
But there are members of my family now who still talk to me, but they otherize me. They say, well, in our church we believe. And I'm like, well, hang on. I'm still a member of this church. I know all this stuff. These scriptures are well marked. The well marked copy of my scriptures. I studied. I got 100% attendance in seminary. I graduated all 4 years. I took it seriously. So, but you do get naturally otherized by people who can't comprehend that you could remain part of their in-group but be heavily critical. So the only way for them to deal with it is to be like, well, in our church we believe, or treat you like a visitor all the time.
Yes, which says a lot about an organisation, that all of that years of experience from birth, all of that family history of being members of the church in your DNA is gone as soon, and you've not even left the church, but as soon as you have said, this is happening,
there's
and
a problem.
this person's told a fib, and this person has done something that definitely sits the wrong side of legality, that others you straight away in the eyes of the organisation, and that's a little bit worrying about an organisation.
And this individual, I know that they, I know that now I know more about the church than they do, so it's always very interesting for me. And I don't like to make that claim very often because ex-Mormons make that claim broadly, and it's like, I know more about your church than you do. It's not always true because that other person may know a lot about this stuff. But in this case, I am aware that it's very likely I know a lot more about the history of the church and about the doctrines governing when a disciplinary council should be called against the first presidency than they do. So I have all this knowledge, and yet I'm on the other side.
Yeah. Until they need you to join in with the choir.
Or so they need me to join in with the choir or help out with a medical emergency or whatever it might be. Then all of a sudden I'm useful.
You're useful. And I obviously you're doing quite a lot of stuff. This has become your full-time day job now, hasn't it? That's a massive, for want of a better phrase, leap of faith.
Yeah. And it's difficult too because now I can't talk to some members of my family about my work. How's work going?
Yeah.
The Mormon Church is still being the Mormon Church, so great. They're still doing mental stuff, so I still have stuff to talk about. The quickest way for the Mormon Church to put me out of a job is for them to stop tripping themselves up all the time. because I won't just complain about nothing. If they started just offloading cash into charitable causes and started
Amazing.
not shaming people and all that sort of stuff, I'd be like, right, okay, I guess it's time to go back to my other career, and I can just go back to my other career and move on.
Yeah.
But not right now. So
Yeah. And I know, again, looking in the comment section, there's one particular frequent flyer who likes to talk about how we've monetized
yeah,
talking about the Mormon Church.
hmm
Oh, the irony, because the Mormon
yeah,
Church has found a fantastic way to monetize a religious belief.
hmm
But yeah, so what is your, if somebody came at you with that you've monetized this,
yeah.
what's your sort of normal
Well, yeah,
response?
especially because they say, well, you criticize the church for having all this money, but you're making money and you're not being financially transparent. Well, that's my personal finances, so I'm under no obligation to share those. Whereas a charitable organization morally should be transparent and prove to people that they are being charitable. Otherwise, anyone could claim to be charitable if no one got a chance to look at their books. That it's fraud central.
Yeah.
The other thing is, particularly with apologists, what makes me different to apologists who are paid by the church? Well, I'm not paid by the church. So I'm not paid by an institution to represent their opinions. People are paying me because they like or they find value in my personal opinions. So people will donate for that reason. And I put in work to make informative content that's well researched and sourced. So why shouldn't I get paid for that?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's my answer in a nutshell, is that I get paid because I produce things that people find valuable. And I don't ever claim to be charitable with that money, whereas the church does. So the church produces things that people find valuable: church materials, meeting houses, Sunday services, of course, so people pay their money. But then the church says that that money is going to be used for that and charitable work, and the charitable work element is missing,
Yeah,
essentially.
but hugely so.
Yeah.
And I think the way that the church has manipulated the different charitable
hmm
rules and tax regimes of different countries.
I mean, 74 million they just spent on an Amazon warehouse in Wembley. And loads of
So
people are
they're
saying, oh, they're going to use it as a bishop's storehouse, they're going to use it for disaster
no,
relief.
they're going to rent
No,
it to Amazon.
they continue to rent it to Amazon. In fact, some woman said, do your research before you bash the church. Do you not know how much they give in millions? Do you not know that they'll use this for humanitarian aid? I said, well, currently they're set to rent it to Amazon over the long term, and it's predicted that their rents will go up, so they will make money. Source: the research I did before I chose to bash them.
Yeah.
Because I did do my research, and I do my research.
Yeah.
And the church is not behaving very well.
No, I mean, it's a savvy investment. As a business, it's a savvy investment. Amazon are doing fantastic. We all
Mm-hmm.
online shop now. I think it's a no-brainer, really.
Mm-hmm.
Amazon warehouse comes up for lease. You want to be the landlord? Go for
And if
it.
I knew that they took those profits and I could
Did something
prove that they
useful
gave
with
them
it.
to charity,
Amazing.
I would have no problem with it. I'd be applauding it like the next
Yeah.
person. But there is no evidence that that's what will happen to that money. They've given us no reason to believe that that is what will happen with that money, particularly because of other financial behaviours that we now have evidence of. Before 2019, it would have been easy to say, oh, well, they might be doing charitable work with it. But the interesting thing I find about Covent Garden IP, which is the charity the church set up to do all this investing, so it's a shell company, right? It's not, but it's them creating other companies to do things. So Covent Garden IP, its express mission statement is to further the charitable work of the church in the United Kingdom. Now, I think someone needs to look at that carefully, because if that money is getting shipped out to Salt Lake, they're not doing charitable work in the United Kingdom. And how can a charity be set up in the UK that is not doing charitable work in the UK? It surely
And
has to exist as an international charity, and that would be a different thing, I'm sure.
and for an organisation that likes to put their name on absolutely
Mm-hmm.
everything, to set up
Yeah.
an IP that just calls something bland like Covent Garden, linking it to London,
A
linking it
London neighbourhood,
to,
yeah.
yeah, um,
Well, again, right? Ag
name it for the
reserve.
church. If you're proud of your religion, name it for
Mm-hmm.
the church. Put something in there that allows people to see who's actually investing this
Mm-hmm.
money.
Yeah, ag reserve is the same.
Yeah.
Ag reserve is their agricultural like profit making arm. Intellectual reserve, if you let's look in this hymn book, for example, and the copyright for it, I believe, is held by Intellectual Reserve Inc., which is a subsidiary of the church. There you go. Copyright 1998 by Intellectual Reserve Inc., all rights reserved. So the copyright for this isn't held by the church. The copyright for this book is held by Intellectual Reserve, which is owned by the church. So
there's a lot of grey men in the background
mm-hmm.
of the religion that I held dear for many, many years, and certainly broke my heart to figure out what was going on under the surface. But you're hanging in there. So why do you hold on? What are you staying for?
Members of my family who are still in. I want it to be a better place for them. I've got nieces and nephews who are going to likely grow up in this church, and whether their parents see it or not, it's not going to be a good place for them unless things change. I hold on because this is my people, this is my tribe, this is what I grew up with, and I think pragmatically this is where I can make a difference in the world. Yeah, a lot of the criticism I get is, why don't you tackle the Catholic Church? Why don't you look at Islam? Why don't you look at Jehovah's Witnesses? It's like, just look anywhere but our church, please. Just look somewhere else. It's like, well, no, this is what I know. This is what I can make a difference in. This is, where I can push. Will MacAskill is a philosopher based here in Oxford who talks about how we can give better to charity and things. I talk about him all the time. But one of the main schools of thought about Will MacAskill and his better giving initiatives are that if you can get large corporations to do better with their money, that's more charity work than you can do in your entire lifetime. If I can pressure the church to give 1% more to charity, the fact that pressure from me and other people caused the church to give $1 billion to charity, even if they did fudge the numbers last year, that's still a big win. And that's still more good than I could have ever done in my lifetime by just giving all my wages away to charity.
Yeah.
So pressuring big organizations like this to behave better is important. And I have a position where I know so much about this organization and I can try and affect change from all sorts of positions that I think that's worth sticking around for.
I think that's really valuable for people to understand, that it's an advocacy place, and it's that there are people that you would like to see be able to have a better time of it in the future. You can be optimistic of a future possibility for this religion if you are willing to take the knocks now.
If it survives.
That's the thing that causes change, isn't it?
What do you think? Sorry, just to say one more point on that, because it's just come to me, is that at the moment the church has, on paper, 17 million what you could call shareholders. It has about 5 million active people who,
I was going to say, those numbers don't work, do they?
If they raise their voice, they could have an effect on what the church does with this money.
Yeah.
And advocating for them to do that is very important, because the more the church shrinks, the more this vast hoard is just concentrated in the hands of men that have proven themselves over time to be quite selfish and quite obsessed and absorbed, and have hidden this money for so long and are just obsessed with making money. So if those shareholders go away, if those agitators for a better use for that money go away, then all of a sudden, because it's a corporate soul, you've got whoever the prophet is, say Dallin H. Oaks, when the church finally crumbles, or Bednar when the church finally crumbles, they're just sat on a pile of $300 billion and do with it what they want, because they're not answerable to any people anymore. We need to realize that they are actually answerable to us if enough of us speak out, and that's important. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, no, and I think that's really important to dwell on the fact that actually we have far more autonomy than we think we do when we're active believing members. We've just been told that we don't, and it's a little bit like, and I'm showing my age here, but that Disney, I think it's a Disney, might have been a Pixar film, is it Ants, where they stand up to the locusts?
Yeah.
And eventually,
or is that Bug's Life? I can't remember.
Oh, maybe it's Bug's Life. It's Bug's Life.
Yeah.
My children aren't young anymore, can you tell? But
That's right from my childhood, though. So
oh, okay.
don't worry.
That's that thing of realizing that. Hang on a minute. Without us, there is no church. The people are the church. There was a really good talk many years ago now where somebody, I think it was Suarez, might have said, the people of the church. I found that really empowering as an active believing member because I suddenly realized, it's not about the pews. It's not about the physical building. It is wherever the people have gathered together to worship. That is the church. That is where the strength lies. That talk went down the memory hole very, very quickly because that is a hugely empowering statement for believing members and a hugely disempowering sentiment for the upper echelons of Mormonism, and puts them on a much more shaky ground. To think that we could reclaim our strength and say, this isn't happening, or we have a right to actually understand why you're doing what you're doing. And you need to talk, just saying, well, I'm in charge and Jesus said, is a little bit divine right of kings sort of territory, isn't it? And I think the Book of Mormon had things to say about that.
It did indeed. Who was it that talked about Potemkin? Potemkin last conference.
Potemkin villages,
Yeah, and what you've got now essentially is a Potemkin church, or that's what you'll end up with, is Potemkin temples. This church that looks massive because Russell M. Nelson's just spending all the cash building temples, but just there's no one to run them, so they're just these empty mausoleums to Mormonism, essentially. That's what they are. They're just these Mormon mausoleums of just emptiness to a church that had the potential to do some good in the world. Take away their religious message, just look at the cold hard cash.
Yeah,
they could do so much good in the world with it.
It could be amazing, and I've heard other people talk about it. I've thought about it and talked about it when I was active and believing as well for years, which is you don't need a single missionary if you actually go out and do good in the world. That people will come to you and say, who are you? What motivates you? How come you're doing all these good things for people?
Come to church and find out.
Thoughts yourself. Yeah, you're just like, oh, do you know what? That's just part of my religion to do nice things. There's a Gurdwara in Leicester city centre that obviously that it's free food, and ironically, the missionaries would go there to get fed. Missionaries from our church would go into the city centre to eat.
I've stood on some of those open tables before. They're quite something. And then
because
people come and ask.
They're religious, they're motivated by their religion to give to all freely, and they would feel that that compelled to be kind, compelled to be good to people, and that kind of dynamic would be so wonderful to see coming from the Mormon Church. I, in one of my last callings as a Relief Society president, we got involved with a homeless charity who on a Wednesday evening we did it quite a few times. We would go into the city centre. There was a homeless charity that did like a soup kitchen in the undercover market in Leicester city centre, and handed out toiletries, handed out whatever people needed. There was food, and we manned the tables and just helped hand stuff out. And
I think it might be the same organisation I was involved with, actually. They did a similar thing. So people would bring things, but they'd bring the main vegetarian dishes, and you'd hand out
lots
things to people.
Shops and things would donate end of stock sort of sandwiches and cake or whatever that could be handed out and eaten that day. And it was an uphill battle to get that passed, that we could go as grown adult women, that we needed somebody's permission to go and stand alongside this other charity and just lend our hands, essentially. We weren't promoting the church. We weren't wearing tabards. We were just being human beings, being kind to other human beings.
That's the problem.
But
we weren't wearing the tabards.
Yeah, somewhere further up the chain, they were saying, oh, no, but this isn't on a list of approved charities that we're supposed to be working alongside. Get over yourself.
Because I'm pretty sure Jesus said, thou shalt not work with charities that are not approved.
Yeah.
I heard that somewhere.
Yeah, and I think as soon as the Mormon membership, because there are so many good people who happen to be Mormon, as soon as Mormon membership reclaim that power, become ants with conscience and reclaim their autonomy, wow, that Mormonism could be a really dynamic, exciting place to be. And if that's where you find connection to a religion, to religious beliefs and Christianity and all of those things, great. What is the worst part of staying though?
What's the worst part of staying? I don't know really. It's difficult for my wife, I think.
Okay.
One of the hardest bits. She'd rather just forget Mormonism existed and move on. So it's quite difficult for her. But she gets it. She gets what I'm doing. The hardest part, I'd say, actually, is the constant rejection by leaders. I spent 18 months wearing Dan Oaks down into talking to me, only for him to just completely, promise to do something and then let me down. I think it's the being let down and the rejection that's actually quite difficult, because I naively sometimes expect better of them than they are actually capable of, which is a shame. But I have great leaders who are willing to help me push things, so hats off to them. I'd say that's the worst part, and knowing that people around me don't appreciate that what I'm doing is actually for their benefit in the long run. Because the church is working for them for whatever reason, and that's fine, but it won't work for their kids, a percentage of their kids, or it won't work for a percentage of their grandkids, and then they're going to be really upset, and they're going to wonder why they left, and they're not going to understand because no one's telling them what's wrong.
And those conversations have to happen. But it is painful, isn't it? It's painful to have to tell people this doesn't work for people, this hurts people, it can kill people, has killed people, and that's terribly hard to have to burst that bubble if it is something that seems to be bringing happiness to somebody.
And letting people realise that the hard-earned money they've given over all these years has just been sat doing nothing. I think that was one of the most heartbreaking things for Richard, because his mum was extremely generous and very kind lady, and had always given through the church, because she felt that way all of her sacrifice and all of her money would go to the charitable causes, and the church could do good with it, rather than giving to an outside charity where there'd be admin costs and maybe advertising would have to take place, and she didn't want to get her money used that way. She wanted it to go to good causes straight away, 100% unfiltered. To find out that wasn't happening, I'm so glad she didn't know. I'm so glad she never realised. But for Richard, that was heartbreaking, because I've seen people realise and stop paying their tithing, and and I think it's telling that the church is starting to really kind of push getting people in the building and paying tithing, because they've realised that tithes are down, because people have realised, hang on, why am I giving this money over? Because it's not doing what I thought it was doing. I stood up in Fast and Testimony meeting in Oxford and said how proud I was of everyone that they'd given so generously to the humanitarian aid fund of £6 million or whatever it had grown to, and how disappointed I was that that's just been sent off to Salt Lake and not
in
used.
the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Because that's the thing. That is something to be proud of, that people give so generously. It is something to be proud of. And to have that abused by a corporation who's just looking to make money is awful. It feels like affinity fraud. Almost. But I can't say that, because...
No, you didn't say that.
I didn't say that, because legally it might not be. But that's what it feels like.
That's what it looks like. And if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's probably...
It could be a tapir.
It could be a tapir,
Be a tapir.
And I'm willing to believe that it probably is, until proven otherwise. So if you were doing what you were doing, you'd given up your full-time career, and you were sitting in the apologetic space, do you think people would be happy with you to do that? Members of the family? And do you think you get those same comments about you're getting money for doing this? Or
I've had offers. I've had offers of a calling to work with the church, and use my reach and influence to work with the church. I shall say no more than that. Which obviously declined, because that would come with being able to give up my honesty, and I wasn't going to give
Integrity.
that up, and my integrity.
Mm.
But yes, I've been reached out to.
So you, I find that mind blowing, but how cynical of them
with
that
a
they
straight face as well. They managed it with a straight face.
yeah, and
Yeah.
gosh, well, I'm sort of really offended now because nobody has reached out to me. You know,
Oh, sorry, Ruth.
yeah. Do
Sorry.
you know what? Do you know what? So you've talked about seminary. I just want to impress that you will have done the 4 years, early
Yep.
morning,
Yep.
getting up before
Yep.
6, stumbling
Memorizing
into
scripture
a
masteries.
cold car,
I used to
being
cycle. I
driven.
know, not
Did you
stumbling into a
get
cold car.
caught
I cycled to seminary because we didn't have a car.
from wind or rain? And in
Wind
the
or rain.
wintertime comes snow.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, every morning cycled. I'd get up at 5. Yeah, cycle all the way there. So about a mile and a half. Wasn't terribly long, but yeah. Get on
Yeah,
my bike, freezing cold hands, that
yeah.
sort of stuff. Wrapped up in
Cycle
a
to
scarf.
seminary. Did you go straight from seminary off to school?
Yeah, so I went
Yeah,
to a member's house, had breakfast there, and would go straight to school afterwards because there was a member that lived just around the corner from my school.
yeah.
Go there, go straight to school, and then come home. So it was long
Yeah.
days.
Really
Long
long
days.
days, and it's a big sacrifice. But I remember my years of seminary feeling like, oh, this is good because I'm wide awake then for school, and it was a good. I felt at the time, hindsight, wonderful thing. I felt at the time it's a really good grounding in. I understood my scriptures.
Yeah.
I knew my church better than other people knew their churches. You have a huge amount of just belief in your own ability to understand and navigate your way through scriptures and
Yeah.
talk with authority about our beliefs when you've done those seminary years.
I used to go to the Christian Union at sixth form and talk about Mormonism and stuff like that. Defender of the faith and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. So what is it that you now know that you wish you'd known in seminary?
Ooh,
Or what are some of the clangers that you kind of go, oh crap, I probably really defended that and now I've got a little bit more understanding of that.
I wish I'd not glossed over D&C 132. I wish I'd actually properly read that because it was glossed over in the lessons. So they were like, I read the entire of Doctrine and Covenants,
We all did, yeah.
but that part was kind of skipped over, so I didn't really pay much attention. I kind of just read it. I wish that had hit me harder. Doctrine and Covenants generally, as a book of scripture, is quite damaging to the church history when you really look at it. And I just wish I'd studied it a bit. I wish I'd not let them guide my study of it, because you feel like in seminary, because someone's guiding your study, you don't need to look any deeper. And I wish I had. I wish it had also been more of a red flag to me when my seminary teacher said, don't research outside of the church website.
Yeah.
I wish that had hit me harder, and I'd gone, well, why not?
So I had a conversation with Elliot, our eldest, recently. Again, apologising to him for raising him as a Mormon. No, it's a cyclical program of me apologising. But him pointing out to me, he said, "Mum, you were a child when you joined the church," which I was. Richard was born into the church. Our kids we raised as members of the church, and he said we all handed over. We all agreed to believe in this thing before we developed critical thinking skills. And even though you develop those as adults, you never then apply them to the church of that you hold dear, that your faith, because it's sort of sits in a separate part of the brain almost. And it's only when you do start applying those things and realizing all the thought stopping, all the don't look in this area, don't look outside. I remember being told, preparing lessons, you don't look outside the correlated materials. Everything you need will be in there. So what was the point where you allowed yourself to look out?
It was university. I lived with, and I've talked about this in depth before, but I lived with some people. I lived with the head of the Islamic Society. I lived with someone studying law who was an atheist. I lived with another atheist lad, and then someone who was Welsh. I don't know why that's his qualifier, but he was also. I never quite worked out his religious beliefs. I think he might be sort of Anglican. But anyway, we would have conversations, and they would force me. They taught me critical thinking skills. We spent a lot of time debating, and they taught me the rules of kind of debate and of good thought and these sorts of things. At the same time as I was learning it for university. But then when we're having these debates, they would almost force me to apply these critical thinking skills to Mormonism, and that was quite difficult. But I had to I went down that rabbit hole and had to do that. So that's when it kind of started, and then it was just before I finished university. I was doing my dissertation and everything like that, and I hit this phase crisis. I'd started. It was lockdown. It's COVID. It was just starting, and I'd been looking up some things late at night, and I think it's the age of the Earth hit me, and then it was a bit of a rabbit hole from there. But I've gone through all that before, you know.
And it's so interesting though that it was, because I've heard people say before, you know, that you going to university doesn't help you to stay religious, and it's not that university is the bad thing. No. It's that there's faults and failings then with.
And I still used to go to church every week while I was at university. Yeah. I was at church, but then I started to get uncomfortable. They'd asked me to teach about the flood. I started to get uncomfortable because I was like, I don't think that really happened in the way that we teach it did. Right. So how am I going to do that? So church started to become uncomfortable progressively. And then when I came back from university, so my second year I was newly married and we were still going to church, and it was a bit of a struggle because it first started with like those flatmates. Then I got married, and I kind of retrenched in the church.
And you met through church, didn't you? So you okay.
Met singing in the choir at Bristol YSA convention. That's very Mormon, and so we retrenched, double down because we were newly married. We just got sealed in a temple. It was all very important, wearing garments, all that sort of stuff. I've been wearing garments before because of mission and stuff, and still trying to convert course mates to Mormonism and all that sort of thing. And then by third year, I'd gone on placements, so I was going out to different clinics and seeing patients and all this sort of stuff, and not living away from Manchester, living back in the Midlands. My wife and I were living with my mum, who's a believing member, and then, through all that stressful time and that sort of time to think, it finally kind of came to a head. But it's difficult to pinpoint an exact time. But the reason I say that is because when I got back to the Midlands, I was then called onto Sunday school presidency again, and I was teaching lessons, that were unconventional, should we say, because I couldn't be dishonest.
Yeah. So I think that's a similar process for lots of people on the journey to whether it's to leave Mormonism or to certainly become more nuanced, which is you have to live within your own integrity, don't you? And say, I can't just parrot this stuff anymore. I have to give something here that actually I can sit comfortably with. So that, interesting time to live through. And I think COVID played such a massive part in so many people deconstructing whether they stay or go, because it actually gave people back time.
Yeah.
Which you then realise what a powerful tool of control that is. The church kept us all extremely busy. So,
on purpose. So
as a child in the UK, you've got seminary. What else was in your week? You've got youth night.
So Tuesday, family home evening, Friday, youth night, Tuesday. For me, often ward council because of my calling. So I was often at ward council midweek. Friday night, youth dances or these sorts of things. Then Sunday, rinse and repeat.
Yeah. And Saturday is the day we get ready for Sunday.
Indeed. Yeah. So
we all know this song.
Ironing clothes, all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Polishing shoes.
Yeah. So From a point of view of, you then fell in with the Brit Vengers. How did that happen? Where did the name come from?
I don't know who gets credit for that name. It's not me. That's all I can say. But Peter Bleakley and Julian Heath might argue over who came up with it, and I can't remember who it was, or it might be someone else entirely. Started as a WhatsApp group, and then developed into what it is now. Kind of, it started off as just those who were kind of actively involved in activism in the church, and then through Sunstone and meeting people at Sunstone, it kind of became this podcasting collective that's morphed and grown and become quite something.
Yeah. See, I'm more of a Star Wars fan. I'd have gone with Rebel Alliance, but what do I know?
No, I like Star Wars. That would have been great. The Brit Vengers just stuck, I guess. It's become this thing. John talks about it. He's labelled it the Brit Vengers. And once Mormon Stories has labelled something, that's it, I guess. You're stuck with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so you've now found yourself, and I think you're doing a cracking job as well, just to pat you on the back, whereby you're hopping backwards and forwards across the channel, metaphorically, if not physically sometimes, channel, even the Atlantic to participate in discussion and offer viewpoint to what's going on in the States, which I think is really valuable, because oh my goodness, I sat over here thinking that the saints over in America valued us over in the UK. And then realizing, no, we're just like this tiny little pimple on the side of Mormonism as far as they're concerned. It is all about that Mormon.
Because they got what they needed from us. They got rescued by us in the 1840s. We went over there in droves, saved the church, and that's it. Then they all get to brag about having British ancestry and Scandinavian ancestry, and we're stuck cleaning up the mess.
And as a sort of Wild West religion, it kind of works when you're very isolated, but it really doesn't work when you roll it out to the rest of the world. And when we're sitting over here going, there's big problems with the way you're, having us interpret Mormonism in this country. And Australia is saying the same, Canada is saying the same, other parts of the world raising their voices and saying, this doesn't really work as a concept. It's not a universal one size fits all, which you would think it would be if Heavenly Father and Jesus Christ were really at the helm. But you seem to have gone down a storm. Is it the British accent, or is it?
That's all it is. Yeah.
I was going to say, or is it your intellect and ability to cut through the crap and not waffle?
Well, I think some of it is the brevity.
Yes.
Some of it is the brevity, and that was kind of the area of the market I pushed myself in, because I was like, I don't have time to listen to 3-hour Mormon Stories all the time. No one's doing short form analytical content in the way that I was doing it. So that's where I kind of found myself. And then I've branched out to kind of panel discussions.
Yes.
I'll do topical stuff with the Brit Vengers and things, but yeah.
And I think that works really well. I'm really enjoying what you're doing with John DeLynn at the moment, and Mike, and just breaking down,
I mean, his work's incredible.
It's incredible.
He's something else.
Yeah, really is. But I think you bring a valuable voice to those discussions.
Well, I just tame them both and
channel things.
Yeah, I'll sum it all up and then move us on. Often.
Yeah, which is it's great, and I think, and I delight in this, because I'm a awful wicked person who's stepped away from the church now. But I'm watching Glee, because what nuanced members, believing members who don't want to put up with the nonsense, or ex-members, all are able to do is what the Mormon Church isn't able to do, which is be kind to each other. And just hold space for each other and be able to have a discussion where sometimes people agree and sometimes people disagree, and that's okay. And they don't have to stab each other in the back about it, or ostracize or shun. And I think it terrifies the hierarchy that those conversations are going on, because you can't control that. You can't play whack-a-mole with that, can you? There's always somebody who's got a voice that is willing to speak.
I think the thing that scared them the most was was when the letter got sent out to the bishops. So the letter that 21st Century Saints sent out to the bishops, I helped write and send. So it's got my fingerprints all over it. And they acknowledged that when they sent out the "do not listen to these people" message from the area presidency. They directly referenced me and a letter I'd sent to all state presidents previously. And that was beautiful to watch, because they realized that there is this hive mind, there is this greater force that they just can't control. And it involves active believing members, it involves people that have left the church and resigned their records, it involves people in between. And they don't know what to do about it. So, which is great, because it means hopefully they end up just kind of caving and giving in to doing the right thing.
And I have to have hope that there are enough good people who are still Mormon that change can happen.
I mean, I've got state presidents threatening to beat me up at the same time as I've got state presidents supporting me in addressing the problems. So there's a big range.
Because they're all volunteers, and if you don't have a paid clergy, you don't have a trained clergy, and you just have random people who are ticking certain boxes that are willing to do the job. So you do end up with this real strange mix of characters. And what they don't realize when they're in that position is the church will happily throw them under the bus. If they do then beat you up, then they'll be, do you know what I mean? If they saw you on the street and walloped you, then the church would be standing a long distance away from them and not associating themselves with them. They wouldn't see it as though they did this in our honor. They'd be like, oh, they're a bad person for getting into a scrap. That's the irony, that as believing members, you think the church has your back when you are the Nephi slaying Laban. No, they'll distance themselves from you.
He views himself as this brash defender of the faith, and he's there grandstanding to congregations saying, I take this guy down, and then he actually does something, and the church would be straight away. He'd be on the hotline to the church lawyers going, "What do I do?" And they're like, "Sorry, mate, this is your liability, not ours."
They really
did it happen on church property? No. Did it happen at a church event? No. On your own, bud. That's what Andrew Ford would be telling him.
Yes, he would. And that's the sadness, that you put so much faith and trust in an organisation, and you think you can act outrageously sometimes in defence of that organisation, which is why you end up with someone dressed as Captain Moroni storming the Capitol building in the US for all the world to watch. Oh gosh, poor guy. It just
he got caught.
Yeah, he did. I don't suppose the church was defending him.
No, I don't think Kurt McConkie sent a lawyer to get him out of trouble, funnily enough. But if he'd abused a child in a calling as a member of the church, then the church would be fighting for his legal right not to have to tell anyone about it. So
let's do safeguarding another time, because that's a whole other hour's conversation.
Indeed. But I think that makes the point quite well, is the church will defend their own interests rather than defend their own members.
But their own members are trained to defend the organisation above and beyond real people with real hearts and real families and concerns and health issues and all of those sorts of things. The church comes first rather than the people, and that's just quite sad, really. But so I was listening this morning, just to make it topical, to the latest Mormon Stories with John Larson.
Okay.
I don't know whether you've caught it yet.
Not yet.
So he was talking about, just circling back to monetizing the whole ex-Mormon or nuanced Mormon space. And he was saying how it doesn't, just to put people's mind at rest, it doesn't make a ton of money. It's not a get-rich-quick scheme by any stretch of the imagination, and people need to get paid to do a day job. But he was looking into the ways that people do make money online, and he said actually one of the best platforms is OnlyFans. So John Larson is thinking of going OnlyFans. And I think just in an effort to so that he could make some money without having lots
all
of
the people with a wonky eye fetish, come find me on OnlyFans.
Exactly. So, if you really get to the stage where you need to lean into that
just
whole
fetishizing Mormonism,
fetishize your and capitalize on people's view that you are Corihor. There's a whole
there's
area.
There's a lot of money
that's
to be made.
Explored. Yeah. Someone will pay you. But yeah, so I think looking to the future, we've looked to the past. We know what 8-year-old you would do. Where do you see the future going? Where do you see yourself 10 years, 20 years? What do you think your job will need to be, especially for the UK?
Is it bad I haven't thought that far ahead?
No, not at all.
Because I just haven't. I'm just taking it as it comes, really. That is... I tried planning for the future once, and that future went all the way to eternity, and I got let down, so I think I'm just not going to plan that far ahead again.
Ain't that the truth?
That's where it is for me,
Yeah. I think we're all in that position when we've stepped away. Certainly me and Richard are having those conversations where we're going, if this life is all there is, we're going to live like it's all there is, and live with integrity and live with kindness and compassion for people around us, but we're not going to be putting off doing the things that are important because we can wait. The eternities can sort it all out. Do you know what? What if they can't? What if now is what there is? Then we need to have those conversations. We need to do good in the world, all the rest of it, because it might be all there is.
But we know that this is the only one of these we get. Regardless of what comes after this is the only time we get doing this like this now. So you've still got to make the most of it.
Yeah.
Because even if the next life is infinitely better, doesn't matter. It's still not this. So, and that's the lie that they sell, is that it's some sort of replacement or substitute.
Unfortunately for you, Nemo, the church is keeping you busy enough that you don't need to worry. You don't need a 5-year or 10-year plan.
No, I just need to wait for them to do the next stupid thing, and then.
And they're coming in clutch. They are not leaving you hanging, are they?
No, not at all. I wouldn't be surprised if Brad Wilcox gets up in a couple of weeks and just says something terrifyingly offensive, and then we'll all have a field day. Because they haven't learned their lesson from last time. They haven't stopped him speaking publicly.
No, and he gets paid to speak publicly. Let's not forget that as well.
Yeah. So he gets paid to spread that nonsense.
Yeah.
So
interesting.
they're going to keep me busy for a long time, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And it sounds macabre, but watching its decline and commentating on it, and at every turn pointing out ways they could stop it. That's the key thing I want to, it's where me and Peter Bleakley align particularly, is we want to point out not just that it's dying, but what we could do to stop it, or where it's too late, which in some places it is just too late now.
Yeah.
It's kind of gone.
I'm just, we need to get out of this corridor.
All right, yeah.
I
can see the Sunday school president. Yeah, prams are being...
My computer's trying to lock me out. 1 second.
Right. Well, there's prams in the corridor while people are being taken into rooms to be set apart. And what other things can I say that will take people right back to the smell of those corridors? I mean, there's a cupboard slightly ajar with baptismal clothing in it. There's
people are rummaging through trying to find the one jumpsuit that doesn't look the color of chewing gum.
Someone's rushing through the corridor because they can't find their spouse and they think they've got this kid. And have you seen so and so? Right, people being thrown out of the chapel so the choir can rehearse. It's all happening. Some kid banging on the piano. There you go. That's the soundscape of a Mormon chapel at this time where we are right now talking.
Yeah. And just a waft of quavers. There was always that, sort of cheesy What's-It smell.
Cheesy What's-It's, some Cheerios off the floor.
Definitely. Delicious. So we do need to clear out, but...
Clear out?
Clear out. Let's get out of here. What is the next thing that's coming up in your calendar that you're excited about?
The closure of Maidstone Stake and potentially Romford. That's in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
That's what's coming up. So we'll be keeping a close eye on that. And seeing and bringing you all the news of what that looks like for the UK, and do a bit of a roundup of how many stakes that brings us down to. That's approximately 10% of UK stakes are gone.
Yeah.
In 1 year. Like when you look at it like a figure like that, that's big. That's a big
massive.
Shrinkage.
It
10%.
really is massive. And again, for anyone who's not in the UK, they perhaps can't comprehend what that feels like to the UK. That is a huge wrench. Just going to the Star Wars thing, it is Obi-Wan Kenobi hearing all of these voices be silenced at once. It is that, isn't it? Where we just kind of go, what? Where have they gone? What's happened? All of those
and with these stake realignments, I feel like they're going to form a barrier to cohesion within the state, because people aren't going to make that much of an effort to integrate these stakes. So you're going to lose the community. You've got wards like Slough and Staines? No, not Staines. Slough coming into Thames Valley stake. We lost Bracknell and I'm terrible with the names at the moment. But anyway, we've lost wards, we've gained wards. Wards that traditionally have never known each other, come from quite different geographical areas.
Yeah.
Slough's very close to London. Reading isn't quite as close. It's going to be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, I like you say, and they haven't got the manpower or will, I don't think, to actually create that cohesion.
And they don't have the cultural events anymore. People bonded within a stake because they were going and doing road shows together, because they were doing stake athletics. They were doing all these things together, and none of those things exist anymore. I've noticed what's really interesting. They brought back tri-stake athletics up where I'm from. So Coventry Stake, Birmingham Stake, and I think is Leicester getting involved?
I don't
know. Or it might be Northampton.
Yeah, possibly.
I don't know. But anyway, they brought it back just after a stake closure, which I think says that they at least have realised, well, hang on, we're going to actually have to start doing some community things again, because these brand new stakes full of wards where people don't know each other, how else are we going to get them to work together? Because we can't rely on them just seeing each other at stake conference twice a year. That won't do it. That's not going to cut it.
Yeah, and it's too little too late. And I think that's a thing that Peter's banged on about for a long time, isn't it? That cultural events, community, actually being together as people is...
Ward Camp. What happened to Ward Camp?
Wow, paedophiles, but there we go.
Yeah, true. People being too trusting with their kids.
That's what happened to Ward Camp.
Yeah.
No, it's sad, but that essentially they didn't have the safeguarding things in place, which meant that things happened and they just went, well, we don't want the litigation, so therefore those things aren't happening anymore.
Rather than just putting the safeguards in place.
Yeah, because actually bad people will find ways to do bad things to kids.
Yeah.
However they can. But how about you had this event for a reason. It was because people wanted it and wanted to be together and enjoy their time and talents together. But yeah, I think it's a changing landscape in Mormonism, and my feeling is we've got 5 years of watching it disintegrate and become a very, very different experience in the UK for UK Mormons. Whatever that looks like, I don't know, but I think it will be a different model in the UK within 5 years, because there's just not enough people. And we've got a whole cohort who are in their mid to late 70s now, who perhaps won't even be around in 5 years' time, that are propping up a lot of stuff at the moment.
Yeah, they're going to lose their diehard members, certainly within the next 10.
Yeah.
A lot of them will be gone. Yeah. And whether they preemptively do that, anything like that, 5 years before, I don't know. But the church is dying in the UK, and I think these stake closures are sort of the death knell.
Yeah.
We're hearing the bells ringing.
I'll get the popcorn and watch with glee.
It's like that Monty Python, is it? Bring out your dead. And then you've got, maybe one ward in the UK that's like, oh, I'm feeling better. That's Chorley, right? Chorley's like, oh, I'm feeling better. No, you're not. You're dead. Bam. And all of a sudden, Chorley's going to get some wards closed. And then all of a sudden, this stake you thought was doing really well, the largest concentration of Mormons anywhere in Europe, all of a sudden just starts falling apart.
Yeah.
we thought, in fact, a more accurate for this Monty Python reference would be it's Lichfield and Birmingham saying, "Oh, I'm feeling better," because they're getting a temple, and the church goes, "No, you're not," and kills off Lichfield's stake. I think that's the best way to use that reference.
Yes, yeah. Oh, well, it's been
There you go.
lovely. Right.
Yeah. But now I need to go find my wife wherever she is in the building.
Yes. And no running around in the cultural hall. You've been told before.
I'm not allowed to put my tie around my head anymore.
No, putting your tie around your head, and yeah, behave yourself in the car park.
The bishop wants to find out if we've paid enough tithing money, so
no spinning donuts. I know what it's like. Yeah, behave yourself. Get out quick before you get roped into a calling, or asked to give someone a lift, because that's
I'll give someone a lift. Fine, unless it's a child and I question their attitude towards safeguarding. Oh, can you just take my kid home? No.
We bought. I'm still chatting.
Sorry.
We're heading towards the door. We bought our last time we bought new cars each. Richard bought a 7-seater car, bearing in mind our kids were pretty much all had left home at that point, with just down to the last two. But we bought a 7-seater because of giving people rides from church still. And I would take my car separately, and Richard would go in here so that we could go and pick up various people. That's just what you do, isn't it? But how bonkers is that now? If I explain that to somebody at work, that was the decision that we bought a much more expensive vehicle than we needed to, because of our commitment to try and be helpful at church. But you're all in, aren't you, as a Mormon? That's what you do. Bonkers. All right, absolutely bonkers.
I'm gonna go home.
Here we are.
Break my fast.
Yeah. No car sweets. I know what you like.
No car sweets.
That's you wait till you're home and you've said a prayer, please. But yeah, well, this is lovely. Thank you so much. And
thank you for having me.
And I'm sure, hang on, my computer's throwing me out again. I'm sure we'll chat again very soon. And fingers crossed, the church, we get a letter tomorrow saying we are giving 140 of that 150 billion to charitable causes. We're going to change the world. There will be no missionary force ever needed again, because we recognise that the most good we could ever do is just being kind and generous. If we get that letter,
fingers crossed for that letter.
You're back down the jobs office looking for a new job. Okay.
I think so.
All right. Take care. Speak soon.
Bye.